The shocking betrayal. The stars were quiet. For centuries, the Galactic Council had maintained peace and order across the galaxy. Its power was unchallenged, and its influence was felt in every corner of the cosmos. At the center of it all was humanity, a race that had once been insignificant, but now stood as a trusted ally to the Council. The humans had worked hard to earn their place among the stars, their ships and technologies respected by all. However, deep within the Council chambers, a new plot was taking shape, one that would change the course of history forever. The Galactic Council, composed of the most powerful species in the galaxy, had long viewed humanity with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. Despite their impressive technological advancements and military prowess, the Council had never fully trusted the humans. They were unpredictable, unbound by the ancient rules that governed most galactic civilizations. But that was precisely why humanity had become so valuable. They brought innovation, new ideas, and a fearless determination that no one else seemed to possess. In the Council's highest chambers, the representatives from the most powerful species met. The Council's hall was a grand structure, with towering pillars and vast windows that looked out into the endless void of space. The leaders gathered around a massive table, their faces grim as they discussed the growing power of humanity. They had quietly watched as humanity built its fleets and expanded its reach, and now the humans were becoming too powerful for the Council to ignore. "We can't allow this any longer," said the Thaurix, the reptilian leader of the Council. His voice was cold, calculated. "Humanity is a threat to our control. They must be stopped before they become too powerful to challenge." The other leaders murmured in agreement. For years, they had overlooked humanity's growing influence, but now they could no longer deny that the humans were becoming a force to be reckoned with. The Thaurix's plan was simple: betray humanity, strip them of their rights, and remove them as a threat. The Council would use the humans as pawns, exploiting their resources and technological advancements, only to discard them when they were no longer useful. "Once the humans are dealt with, the galaxy will return to its natural order," the Thaurix continued. "We can't risk another species rising to challenge the Council's dominance." The other representatives nodded. They were all in agreement, convinced that humanity's rise had to be halted at any cost. But little did they know, their plan would be their undoing. The next day, the Council voted. The decision was swift and decisive. Humanity would be accused of treason, framed for a crime they had never committed. A false report was created, detailing a plot by humans to attack the Galactic Council's core systems. The accusation was shocking, but the evidence was fabricated with such skill that it seemed undeniable. The members of the Council, united by their shared desire to protect their power, were quick to act. They stripped humanity of its privileges, cutting off all trade, diplomatic ties, and access to the most advanced technologies. The humans were declared outcasts, their once proud position in the galaxy shattered in an instant. As the news spread, shockwaves rippled through human space. Leaders scrambled to respond, but the damage had already been done. The once strong alliance between humanity and the Galactic Council had crumbled, and now the humans were on their own, branded as traitors. No one could have predicted the depth of the betrayal. The Galactic Council had made a grave mistake. On Earth, the news of the betrayal hit like a thunderclap. For years, humanity had been at the forefront of the galaxy, respected by their allies and feared by their enemies. Now, they were cast out, accused of treason, and abandoned by the very people they had fought beside. The leaders of Earth gathered in a secret meeting, their faces grim as they absorbed the full weight of what had just happened. "This cannot stand," said General Raymond, the leader of humanity's military forces. His voice was filled with anger, but also with determination. "We've been betrayed, and now it's time for us to show the galaxy what we're truly capable of." The human fleet, a vast and powerful force that had been quietly built over the years, stood ready. The humans had anticipated the possibility of betrayal and had prepared for it in secret. Their ships, equipped with advanced weapons and technology far beyond the Council's understanding, were waiting for the moment to strike. "We're not just going to sit here and let them destroy everything we've worked for," said Captain Elisa, one of the fleet's most experienced commanders. "We'll make them regret underestimating us." The humans didn't know what the future would hold, but one thing was certain: they would not let this betrayal go unpunished. The Galactic Council had made the mistake of thinking that they could break humanity. Now they would face the consequences of their actions. As humanity's leaders prepared for the inevitable confrontation, they knew that the fate of the galaxy was about to change. The first steps toward retaliation had been taken, and soon the galaxy would know the true power of the human spirit. The Galactic Council had underestimated them, and that would be their greatest mistake. The call to arms. The days following the Galactic Council's betrayal were filled with confusion and disbelief. Humanity had been cast aside, falsely accused of treason, and shunned by their once proud allies. Across Earth, the news was met with disbelief. How could the very beings they had fought beside for so long turn on them so easily? But as the shock wore off, a sense of unity began to take hold, the anger transforming into resolve. General Raymond stood in front of a massive screen in the Earth Defense Command Center. The faces of his senior commanders were illuminated by the soft glow of the holographic display. They had spent hours analyzing the Council's false accusations and studying the political and military implications of their sudden outcast status. Their task was clear: prepare for war. But how could they fight the Council, a seemingly invincible conglomerate of powerful species? Raymond's thoughts were interrupted as Captain Elisa walked in, her expression as grim as the others, but with a glint of determination in her eyes. She was one of the most respected leaders within the fleet, and her name was synonymous with courage. "Sir," she said, standing tall, "we can't wait any longer. The Council will move against us soon, and we need to strike first." General Raymond nodded. He knew she was right. The Galactic Council's betrayal had left humanity with only one option: to go on the offensive and reclaim their place in the stars. But they would need more than just military strength. They would need to strike at the heart of the Council's power, to make them regret ever underestimating humanity's resolve. Raymond turned to the holographic map, his finger tracing the star systems of the Council's empire. "We have the element of surprise," he said, his voice firm. "The Council doesn't know what we're capable of. They think we're weak, that we're disorganized and fractured. We'll prove them wrong." Captain Elisa's eyes narrowed as she studied the map. "We've got the fleet, but we also have something the Council doesn't: the power of unity. Humanity doesn't back down. We never have, and we never will." The general smiled grimly, his mind already working through strategies. "We'll hit them where it hurts the most," he said, his voice quiet but full of deadly purpose. "The heart of their power, their central government. If we can take that down, the Council will fall apart." The plan was risky. The Galactic Council had a vast, almost limitless network of resources, and their military was unlike any the universe had ever seen. But humanity's fleet had been preparing for this moment for years, secretly building a force that rivaled the most powerful empires in the galaxy. The humans had one advantage that the Council could never have predicted: their drive and their will to survive. "We strike at dawn," Raymond decided, his eyes hardening. "Prepare the fleet. Make sure every ship is ready. We'll give the Council a reminder of why they should never underestimate humanity." As the order was passed throughout the fleet, the hum of activity filled the human space stations. Crew members, pilots, engineers, and soldiers worked tirelessly, preparing for the assault that would alter the course of galactic history. It wasn't just a battle, it was a statement, a declaration that humanity would never be broken. On Earth, news of the coming battle spread like wildfire. The people who had once looked to the stars with hope and curiosity now looked up with determination. They knew the fight ahead would be difficult, but their spirits were unwavering. Humanity had been wronged, and they would fight to restore their honor. Every corner of Earth was united, from the military command centers to the ordinary citizens who knew that their future depended on the outcome of this conflict. As the fleet readied itself, General Raymond gathered his commanders once more. They had worked together for years, but this was different. This wasn't just a battle for territory or resources. It was a battle for their very survival. And they were ready. The fate of humanity's place in the galaxy hung in the balance. But they weren't afraid. "We fight not for our past, but for our future," Raymond said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "We fight because we are humans, and we will never back down." The Council may have thought they could crush us with one simple stroke, but they made a fatal mistake. Humanity's strength comes from our unity and our spirit. They will regret ever underestimating us. Captain Elisa nodded, her face filled with resolve. They've made their mistake, and they'll pay for it. The fleet, now ready, began to move. The ships, sleek and advanced, hung in space, their engines powering up as they set their course for the heart of the Galactic Council. The battle that would unfold in the coming days would be unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Humanity was not just fighting for survival. They were fighting for the right to exist as equals in a galaxy that had tried to cast them aside. But there was one thing the Council didn't know. Their greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their numbers. It was humanity's unwavering determination to protect what they loved, to never give up, and to fight until their last breath. As the fleet sped toward the Council's homeworld, the crew members stood at their stations, their hearts pounding with anticipation. They were about to make history. The Galactic Council had betrayed them, but humanity was ready to prove that no force in the universe could defeat the power of the human spirit. The countdown to the battle had begun, and soon the galaxy would feel the full force of humanity's wrath. The fleet's first strike. The quiet hum of the engines filled the air as humanity's fleet hurtled through space, racing toward the heart of the Galactic Council's power. The tension was palpable among the crew members aboard the massive ships, each of them aware of the magnitude of what was about to unfold. This would not be just any battle. It was the beginning of humanity's reckoning, the first of many strikes against those who had once claimed to be their allies. General Raymond stood on the command bridge of the Titanic, the flagship of humanity's fleet. His eyes scanned the star-filled expanse ahead of him, but his mind was focused on the task at hand. He knew that this battle could determine the future of humanity in the galaxy. If they won, they would send a message to the entire galaxy that they could never be ignored again. If they lost, the consequences would be devastating. Beside him, Captain Elisa stood, her gaze locked on the tactical display. "We've reached the Council's first defensive line," she reported, her voice calm but tinged with determination. "Our fleet is in position. They won't see us coming." Raymond nodded. "Good. Our advantage lies in the element of surprise. We've studied their defenses, and we know where their weaknesses are. We strike fast and hit hard. We'll take them by surprise." The Titanic and the rest of the fleet were on a direct course for one of the Council's many military strongholds. It was a key strategic point in their vast empire, and the human fleet's mission was simple: destroy it. If they could cripple the Council's ability to defend its own territories, they would have an opening to strike deeper into enemy lines. "All ships are primed and ready," Elisa said, a slight smile forming on her lips. "Let's show them what humanity is capable of." Raymond allowed himself a brief smile before his expression hardened. "No time for hesitation. We've trained for this. Now, we fight." At his command, the fleet surged forward. Waves of human ships, ranging from massive dreadnoughts to smaller but equally powerful destroyers, plunged toward the heavily fortified position of the Galactic Council. The Council had always prided itself on its vast, impenetrable network of defense systems. It was designed to stop any invaders before they could even approach its core worlds. But humanity's fleet had something the Council could never have predicted: a mix of technological advancements, adaptability, and sheer determination. Suddenly, The silence of space was shattered by the crackling of energy shields and the roar of laser fire as the first clash of weapons erupted in the void. Humanity's ships fired their weapons with deadly precision, targeting weak spots in the enemy's defenses. The enemy was caught off guard. Although they had prepared for a battle with humanity, they had never expected the humans to strike so boldly and so fast. The Titanic unleashed a devastating barrage of plasma bolts, ripping apart the enemy's outer defenses. The explosions sent shockwaves through the enemy fleet, as several ships were disabled in the first few moments of the battle. On the bridge of the Titanic, the crew cheered briefly, but there was no time to celebrate. They knew this was only the beginning. The real fight had just begun. "They're regrouping," Captain Elisa warned. "More reinforcements are coming. We can't let them stall us." General Raymond's voice cut through the rising chaos. "Keep pushing forward. We take out their command ship. Then we can cut off their ability to respond." The human fleet pressed on, unrelenting. With every strike, every tactical advantage, they carved their way deeper into the heart of the Council's defensive lines. The battle raged across space, with flashes of light lighting up the dark void. Each ship, each crew member, played their part in a war that was not just about survival, it was about sending a message. Humanity was not to be underestimated. As the battle continued, the Council forces began to retreat, but not without a fight. They were shaken but not broken. Ships exploded into fireballs, and debris flew in all directions. It was a brutal, relentless onslaught. The human fleet was determined, pushing the Council forces back. The roar of energy cannons and explosions filled the air as ships on both sides exchanged fire. On the Titanic, the tension was thick. Raymond watched the display, a mix of calm and calculated intensity in his eyes. His crew followed his every command, their hands moving swiftly over controls, locking in targets, and launching new attacks. "Elisa," Raymond called out, his voice sharp. "Initiate Phase 2. We've done enough damage here. It's time to cripple their reinforcements." "Yes, sir," Captain Elisa responded, her hands moving over the controls as she ordered the fleet to transition to their next phase of the operation. Humanity's fleet split into smaller divisions, each one targeting a different objective. While some ships continued to hammer the remaining defense structures, others began to target the fleet's remaining reinforcements. Every movement was coordinated with deadly precision, each strike calculated to create maximum disruption in the Council's forces. Within hours, the tide of the battle began to shift in humanity's favor. The enemy fleet, once a towering force of ships and soldiers, was crumbling under the weight of humanity's relentless assault. It was a devastating blow to the Council's power, and humanity had only just begun. As the Titanic blasted through yet another enemy ship, General Raymond allowed himself a small, satisfied nod. They had done it. They had proved to the galaxy that humanity was not a race to be trifled with. But even as the battle continued, he knew this was only the beginning. There would be more challenges ahead. The Galactic Council would not bow easily, and their power was vast. But humanity had taken the first step. The fleet pressed on, unstoppable, as the battle for the galaxy began in earnest. The counterattack. Humanity's victory, as impressive as it was, did not go unnoticed. The Galactic Council, though shaken, was far from defeated. As the human fleet pushed deeper into Council space, the response was swift. The once dominant empire that spanned dozens of star systems began to rally. Reinforcements poured in from all corners of the galaxy, massive warships and fleets of soldiers dispatched to the front lines to counter the unexpected human threat. General Raymond stood at the command bridge of the Titanic, staring out into the cold vastness of space. The battle had been a resounding success. But now, as the Council regrouped, he knew the real fight had only just begun. The enemy had underestimated humanity once, but they wouldn't make that mistake again. "General, we've detected multiple enemy fleets converging on our position," Captain Elisa reported, her voice tight with urgency. "They're gathering for a massive counterattack." Raymond's jaw clenched. The Council's response was predictable. They were proud and used to dominance. They wouldn't accept the humiliation of a simple defeat. It was time for the human fleet to make their next move. "We're not retreating," Raymond said, his voice calm but resolute. "We press forward. But this time, we need to be ready. We'll lure them into a trap." The officers around him exchanged wary glances. They had already been battered in the previous battle, and the thought of facing a counterattack from the full might of the Galactic Council was daunting. But Raymond's reputation as a tactician was unparalleled. He had a plan, and that was all they needed. Elisa nodded. "Understood, sir. We'll prepare our fleet for a defensive stance. Draw them in, and when they think they've cornered us, we'll strike with everything we have." The entire fleet shifted its position, breaking into smaller units that would seem more vulnerable than they truly were. The ships drifted toward a series of uninhabited moons on the edge of the Council's system. These moons, seemingly insignificant, would serve as the perfect bait for the Council's forces. It wasn't long before the first wave of Council warships appeared on the radar. The human ships were outnumbered, but the Council's fleet underestimated humanity's ability to think outside the box. Raymond's plan was simple: draw the enemy in close, let them think they had the upper hand, and then spring the trap. "They're taking the bait," Elisa said, a hint of a smile tugging at her lips. "They're coming in fast." Raymond's eyes narrowed. The trap was set. All ships prepare to engage. No mercy. As the enemy fleet closed in, the human fleet, hidden behind the moons, sprang into action. The Titanic led the charge, moving with surprising speed and ferocity. At the same time, smaller ships darted between the moons, launching surprise attacks on the Council forces from unexpected angles. The Council's forces, too eager to crush what they thought was an isolated group of human ships, found themselves surrounded. The human fleet unleashed hell in a coordinated attack, taking advantage of every weakness in the enemy's formation. Plasma beams, missiles, and laser fire lit up the dark expanse of space, turning it into a chaotic battlefield. "This is our moment," Raymond shouted as the Titanic unleashed a barrage of fire at the enemy command ship. "Push them back." The Council fleet was reeling from the sudden onslaught. The humans had caught them off guard, and despite their overwhelming numbers, they were now caught in the same trap they had planned for humanity. The surprise of the attack, combined with humanity's relentless precision, caused panic within the enemy ranks. For a moment, the Council forces faltered. Ships that had once seemed invincible were now retreating, and many had already been destroyed or disabled. The tide of the battle was turning once more in humanity's favor. But the battle was far from over. As the enemy forces began to regroup, the Council's true might came into play. A new wave of warships arrived, larger, faster, and more advanced than any the humans had faced before. These were the Council's elite fleets, their most powerful warriors. "They're bringing out their big guns," Captain Elisa muttered, watching the new ships appear on the radar. "We can't let them regroup. We have to finish this now." Raymond stood tall, his mind racing through the possibilities. If the new fleet was allowed to regroup, it could turn the battle in the Council's favor. He couldn't afford to let that happen. They needed to break their will, crush them completely. "Prepare for a final push," he commanded. "Every ship, every gun. We hit them with everything we've got." The Titanic and the rest of the fleet steeled themselves for the final clash. The humans had already endured a punishing battle, but they were determined. They would not let the Council regain control. This was their galaxy, and they were not about to let it slip away again. The final fight began with an explosion of force as the human fleet slammed into the newly arrived Council reinforcements. The battle was a blur of missiles, plasma, and energy blasts. Ships exploded on both sides, debris raining down as the tide of battle shifted back and forth. The human fleet held firm, their resolve unwavering. Raymond's strategy was clear now. Break the back of the Council's forces and pushed them into full retreat. If humanity could hold on just a little longer, they could win this fight. As the battle waged on, the Council's once proud fleet began to buckle. Their superior numbers were no match for humanity's relentless determination. The counterattack that had seemed so formidable just hours ago now began to falter, and the Council's warships began to break formation, retreating in disarray. General Raymond watched as the enemy fleet scattered before him. The strategy had worked. The Council had been humbled, but Raymond knew this was only a small victory. There were more battles to come, and humanity's fight for their place in the stars was far from over. The fleet had won this day, but the war, humanity's war, was just beginning. The Council's retreat. The human fleet stood victorious in the void of space. The Council, once considered invincible, had been forced to retreat, their massive warships scattering like a storm-driven tide. General Raymond allowed himself a moment to breathe as he surveyed the battlefield, the enemy's once proud fleet broken and fractured. However, the victory was bittersweet. The Council's retreat was not the end of the conflict. Raymond knew it was only a temporary setback for the enemy, and they would soon regroup and retaliate with a vengeance. Humanity had proven itself formidable, but the Council would not let this defeat go unanswered. The war was far from over, and the true cost of the battle was only beginning to sink in. "The battle's over," Captain Elisa said, her voice calm but tinged with the exhaustion that came after a fierce engagement. "But the war is just beginning." Raymond turned to her, his face grim. "Yes, we've won this fight, but we've only scratched the surface. The Council will be back, and when they return, they'll be stronger. We must stay vigilant." He turned his gaze back to the shattered remnants of the enemy fleet, a mix of disabled warships and debris scattered across the cold expanse of space. Humanity had dealt a blow, but the enemy was relentless. The Council would rebuild, adapt, and come after them harder than ever. The human fleet regrouped and took stock of the damage. Though they had emerged victorious, the cost was high. Several ships had been heavily damaged, and many of their fighters had been lost in the chaos. Casualties among the crew were also significant, and the toll of war was visible on the faces of the survivors. Yet, despite the losses, there was a sense of pride that lingered in the air. Humanity had proven that it could stand toe-to-toe with the galaxy's most powerful empire and come out on top. But Raymond knew this victory could be short-lived if they didn't press their advantage. "We need to move quickly," he ordered. "Rebuild our fleet. We've gained some ground, but it's not enough. The Council won't let this go. We need to take the fight to them before they can reorganize." The fleet set course toward the heart of Council space, the silence of space only broken by the hum of their engines. But even as they made their way deeper into enemy territory, Raymond knew that humanity was still facing a monumental challenge. The Council had been shaken, but not defeated, and with their full might still untested, it was clear that the war was far from over. Meanwhile, the Council's high command, far from defeated, had begun to regroup. In their secretive war room, the leaders of the Empire exchanged heated words. Their fleets had been caught off guard, their power shaken by humanity's audacity. They had never considered that the primitive humans, once considered a backwater species, could pose such a threat to the galaxy's greatest empire. "General Korath," a voice rang out from the shadowy corner of the room. The speaker was a tall, reptilian alien, his eyes cold with fury. "You were tasked with dealing with this insignificant species. What do you have to say for yourself?" General Korath, the commander of the Council fleet, stood tall despite the accusation in the air. He was a seasoned warrior, but even he had been blindsided by humanity's unexpected strength. His report was clear. The humans had outsmarted them, exploiting weaknesses they hadn't anticipated. "Sir, humanity is not what we thought them to be," Korath replied, his voice firm. "We underestimated them. They are more resourceful, more dangerous than we could have ever imagined. This war is far from over, and we must prepare for their next move." The room grew silent. The leaders of the council deep in thought. They could not afford to allow the humans to gain any more ground. If humanity was allowed to continue its offensive, the balance of power in the galaxy would shift permanently. "We will not let this pass," another voice spoke from across the room. It belonged to a high-ranking member of the council, an imposing figure cloaked in dark robes. "Prepare the next fleet. Bring in reinforcements from all sectors. Humanity will learn that they cannot defeat the power of the Galactic Council." The High Command quickly fell into action, dispatching fleets, gathering forces from every corner of their vast empire. They were angry, but more importantly, they were determined. Humanity had delivered a humiliating blow, but the Council would not let it stand. As the human fleet pressed forward, moving deeper into Council space, Raymond's mind was consumed with both strategy and the knowledge that their window of opportunity was closing. Every moment they delayed, the Council was regrouping, consolidating their forces. Humanity had proved its mettle, but now, the hard part began. The Council would not allow humanity to simply walk into their territory. The next battles would be harder, bloodier, and more brutal. Raymond and his fleet had tasted victory, but they had also learned a harsh truth. The fight for the galaxy was not one they could win easily. "We're entering the heart of Council space," Elisa reported, her voice steady despite the uncertainty ahead. "It's going to be dangerous from here on out." Raymond looked at her and nodded. "We've come this far, Captain. We're not turning back now. Humanity's fate is tied to this war. We will push forward, no matter the cost." The fleet advanced, ready for whatever the Council had in store for them. Humanity had entered the fight, and they would not leave until they had secured their place in the stars. The war was not over, and the true battle had only just begun. The counterattack. The vast expanse of space felt heavier than ever. Humanity's fleet, once in the shadows of a powerful empire, had now found itself at the heart of enemy territory, facing down an ancient and ruthless foe. The tension within the fleet was palpable. Every officer, every soldier knew that the coming battle would decide the fate of humanity. Victory had been achieved in the past, but this time, the Council would not let their arrogance be their downfall. General Raymond stood in the command center, overlooking the massive holographic map of the battlefield. He could see the enemy's fleet amassing in the distance, the enormous ships of the Council moving into position. It was clear that the battle they were about to fight would not be like the one they had won before. The Council had learned from their mistakes, and they were prepared. "We can't afford to wait any longer," Raymond said, his voice firm and resolute. "Move out. We have to strike before they're fully entrenched." The crew scrambled, working in a synchronized chaos as they prepared to launch. The hum of engines filled the command center, and the fleet's battle groups began to shift into formation. The feeling of anticipation grew heavier by the second, but there was no turning back now. Outside the fleet, in the cold void of space, the Council's ships loomed large. Their towering warships, once the epitome of power, now seemed less like giants and more like wounded beasts ready to strike back. The Council had been humiliated, but their thirst for vengeance was undeniable, and they had brought all their strength to bear. The first wave of human fighters and battlecruisers broke through the enemy's perimeter, but it was immediately clear that the battle would be much harder this time. The Council had adapted their tactics, using their advanced technology to create impenetrable shields and devastating weapons that forced the human fleet to fight on their toes. Captain Elisa watched in disbelief as the enemy unleashed a barrage of energy pulses that tore through space. Several human ships exploded into fiery fragments, and the void was filled with debris. The Council had come prepared. Humanity's tactics, though effective in the past, were being countered with brutal efficiency. "This is far worse than we expected," Elisa said, her voice tinged with concern. "They're not holding back anymore." Raymond's jaw clenched as he observed the chaos unfolding on the battlefield. The loss of ships and lives weighed heavily on his mind, but he refused to show any sign of weakness. If they faltered now, the Council would surely crush them. He had to stay focused. Humanity's survival depended on his decisions. "Continue the assault," Raymond commanded, his voice cutting through the tension. "We cannot let them regain the initiative. Keep the pressure on them." The battle raged on, and soon it became evident that the Council's strategy was to exhaust humanity's fleet, to wear them down through sheer firepower. Humanity's ships were resilient, but they were not invulnerable. Every attack from the enemy pushed them further and further back, and it seemed like the war was slipping through their fingers. But then, just as the tide seemed to turn in the Council's favor, something unexpected happened. A new fleet of human reinforcements arrived from the outer edges of the galaxy, and they brought with them advanced teleportation technology, an unexpected twist in the conflict. The first few ships that teleported in created an immediate advantage, confusing the enemy sensors and catching them off guard. With a flash of light, entire sections of the human fleet appeared in unexpected positions, allowing them to strike at the Council's vulnerable points. Raymond knew this would be humanity's turning point. The Council had not anticipated this technological leap, and now they would pay for their overconfidence. But as the reinforcements continued to arrive, the Council did not falter. Their response was immediate, and they began countering humanity's teleportation tactics with their own advanced countermeasures. New weapons emerged, tearing into the human ships with devastating accuracy. The gap between the two fleets began to close once again. "Elisa, we need to adapt." "Fast," Raymond said, pacing back and forth as he watched the battle unfold. "We can't just rely on brute force. They've seen our moves. We need a new strategy, and we need it now." Elisa nodded, already scanning through the data feeds. "Sir, we can set up a series of decoy teleportation signals. We'll fake a retreat and lure them into a trap. They won't see it coming." Raymond turned to her, his face hardening with determination. "Do it. And get those reinforcements in position. We need to finish this, once and for all." The next moments were a whirlwind of tactics and improvisation. Humanity's fleet feigned retreat, creating a series of false signals that missiled the Council's forces into following them. It was a dangerous maneuver, but if it worked, it would leave the Council vulnerable to a full-scale counterattack. The Council, thinking they had driven humanity to the brink of destruction, pursued the decoys with everything they had. Then, with a burst of precision, the real human fleet emerged from hiding, teleporting directly behind the enemy's vulnerable rear. The full might of humanity's battle fleet descended on the Council's forces in a coordinated strike, targeting their engines and weak spots. It was a moment of pure brilliance, a stunning counterattack that took the enemy by surprise. As the human ships unleashed hellfire on the Council, the tide of the battle began to shift once again. The Council's ships were torn apart, their defensive formations crumbling as humanity's fleet pressed forward. For the first time, it seemed that victory might truly be within reach. But even as the Council's ships fell one by one, General Raymond knew that the war was far from over. The Council's resilience was legendary, and they would fight to the last ship, the last soldier. This was just the beginning. As the battle raged on, Raymond knew the true cost of this victory would only become clear when the final shots were fired. The fight was not yet over, and humanity's struggle for the stars was far from finished. The final reckoning. The tide of battle had shifted, but the war was far from over. As the remnants of the Galactic Council's fleet scattered into the void, broken and battered, humanity's fleet held the line. General Raymond stood on the bridge of the flagship, watching as the stars twinkled outside the viewport. The sound of alarms and battle reports had become background noise in his mind. His focus was razor-sharp, even after hours of intense combat. "Captain Elisa," Raymond called, his voice steady but tinged with exhaustion. "Report on enemy status." Elisa turned from the tactical console, her expression grim. "We've taken heavy losses, General. But the Council's forces are retreating into the outskirts of the system. They're trying to regroup, but we've crippled their command ships. Their supply lines are in disarray." Raymond nodded, though his thoughts remained distant. The victory, though hard-fought, felt hollow. Humanity had dealt a significant blow to the Council, but at what cost? The faces of the soldiers who had fallen flashed in his mind. Each life lost a reminder of the price of this war. "We can't let them regroup," Raymond muttered. "We hit them hard while they're vulnerable. Now, we end this." But before he could issue the next command, a chilling message arrived from the deep space reconnaissance drones. The data they brought was worse than Raymond could have imagined. "The Council isn't retreating," Elisa read aloud, her voice quivering with disbelief. "They've called in reinforcements. A fleet of unknown size is heading toward our position." The news sent a shockwave through the command center. Humanity had fought tooth and nail to get this far, and now the Council was calling upon an even greater force. It was a final gambit, one last effort to crush the rebellion before it could take hold. Raymond turned toward the main view screen. A massive, almost incomprehensible fleet was emerging from the darkness, moving at an unimaginable speed. The sight of it was enough to make even the most hardened officers feel the weight of despair. It was a fleet unlike anything humanity had ever seen, sleek, ominous, and deadly. If the Council had kept this hidden, they had truly underestimated humanity's resolve. "General, the new fleet is equipped with advanced cloaking tech," Elisa continued, her voice filled with urgency. "They've already begun to engage our long-range scanners. We won't see them coming until they're right on top of us." Raymond's eyes narrowed. The odds were against them. But in the face of overwhelming force, humanity had always found a way to survive. They'd never surrendered, not even when the Council had believed they could. And now was no different. "We'll turn the tide again," Raymond said with quiet determination. "Get the fleet into position. We've got one shot at this. No matter what happens, we'll fight until the last ship falls." The command was given, and the fleet shifted its formation. Humanity's ships, battered and worn from hours of combat, began to rearrange themselves, preparing for a last desperate stand. The new fleet would not find them vulnerable this time. Humanity had learned the Council's tactics, and they would use that knowledge to their advantage. As the enemy fleet drew closer, Raymond stood at the heart of his command center, silently watching as each human ship fell into position. This was the moment when the Council would either break or become even more entrenched in their determination to eliminate the human threat once and for all. Seconds felt like hours as the fleet readied for battle. Every officer, every soldier knew what was at stake. They could not afford to fail. If they lost here, the entire galaxy would fall under the iron rule of the Council. But if they succeeded, it would mean the beginning of the end for the Council's reign. The enemy ships, cloaked and moving with terrifying precision, emerged from their hiding spots, ready to unleash their destructive power. But humanity was prepared. Every ship, every soldier had a singular mission: to stop the Council's final assault. With a deafening roar, the first round of fire exchanged across the battlefield. Explosions lit up the stars, and the warships of both sides collided in a cacophony of destruction. Humanity's fleet fought fiercely, using every ounce of their strength and ingenuity to counter the overwhelming power of the Council. Raymond stood with his hands clenched, watching as his fleet engaged in the final battle for their freedom. The screams of battle rang through the communication channels, but Raymond knew that this moment, this final stand, would determine the fate of the galaxy. Despite the devastation surrounding them, there was a glimmer of hope. Humanity was resilient. They had been underestimated, laughed at, and abandoned, but now they were showing the Council exactly what it meant to face the fury of a race that had nothing left to lose. The fight raged on, and as the enemy fleet began to fracture under the weight of humanity's relentless counterattack, Raymond knew they had only one chance to end it. With the Council's reinforcements faltering, he ordered his fleet to push forward, taking the fight straight to the heart of the enemy's command ships. It was the moment of reckoning. With one final, crushing blow, Humanity would show the Council what happens when they dare to betray a species that had fought, bled, and survived against all odds. The galaxy would remember the name of humanity. As the battle continued to unfold, Raymond stood resolute, knowing that the war was about to come to an end. Whether humanity would emerge victorious or fall in defeat, this would be the final chapter in their struggle for the stars.